Thanks so much, Mike. And hi, everyone. Today, Jen and I are going to be talking about administrative reviews. Now, if you're already familiar with LunchAssist, you might know that this is a bit of a specialty of ours. When Jen left her job as a school nutrition director, she actually started LunchAssist by first emailing people to see if they needed help with their administrative reviews and then working with them on those reviews. It's quite literally how she built this. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's talk big picture here. Jen, can you explain to us what is the AR review?
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here. So good to see everyone and just be in community again. Yeah, so ARs, basically an AR is kind of like your audit, right? So you, USDA has all these rules and regulations, right, that we have to follow for the school lunch program. And then the state agency, in our case, California, right, is tasked with going and completing a review to make sure that all the schools are in compliance with all these rules and regulations. And that review is called the administrative review. So it takes place once every 5 years, and it's really kind of like putting your program under the microscope and seeing if you're following all the rules and regulations to make sure that all of the money that you're getting reimbursed for meals is going to good use and that your program is in compliance, menus are being served appropriately, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's a good overview. Now, is there anything new this year that people have to keep in mind?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of stuff that's changed over the years. Like it just depends when your last review was or when your next one is. Those of you who've been doing this for a long time, shout out to Sally Sparrow on the call, one of our mentors in the industry. I know you've been through lots of audits over the time you've been in school nutrition, Sally, and I've learned a lot about the process from you. And it's always changing too, right? Like once you feel like you know one thing, that changes again. Um, it's interesting. So some of the stuff that's good to know, kind of what's changed. There's been a few changes that happened since 2017, and then there's some updates that kind of happened during COVID and then went away again. So sort of just a little bit of a refresh. So for this year, like that we're in right now, the things that you want to know is that essentially USDA has officially gone to a 5 year review cycle. And California was already on a 5 year review cycle because of some state specific waivers, but that's kind of like in effect. Um, Something that's sort of just like a COVID remnant that is not, I don't think officially approved, but it's sort of somehow it's still happening is we have had some schools that are getting their entrance visit virtually. So the state will come out for the meal observation, but then they won't necessarily come out again to do all the other paperwork. So that's good to know because we were expecting it to be fully back in person like it was pre-COVID. But we've seen a lot of reviewers just sort of coming out in person for the meal observations at the cafeterias and then managing a lot of the other paperwork off-site, which we're all for. That's great. It's like, less time in person is better. But and then Buy American was a big change as well. So Buy American's been around forever, but the fact that it's on the administrative review and audited through like a storeroom inspection and a little bit of paperwork, that's new since, gosh, I think like 2019 or so. That was getting more emphasized, enrolled into the AR process. So there's a little bit of a new module there, and it's been codified in the new program integrity rule that passed in September 2023. So it's like officially part of the AR process now. And then something new this year is fiscal action is a little bit more at the state's discretion. So states used to have to give certain fiscal action for meal pattern violations, but there's a little bit more leniency now where they can, take mercy on us. And so that's good, not have to do fiscal action. One thing that we've been noticing for California that's a little different as well is the scheduling of your entrance visit and your meal observation. And we'll talk about the details of that in a few minutes because I have a nice visual. But those are taking place at different times, not always at the same time. And then the last thing is like the digital files as well. So, kind of like what I was saying with like certain things kind of happening off site, there's a lot more digital paperwork. So we recommend
Mm.
people kind of build their files digitally rather than building a physical box, because then you have more flexibility. If your reviewer wants to do part of the stuff offsite, you can just like click them an email or upload something to CNIPS if it's already digital. And along those lines, those of you who are pro members, you can download all your professional standards tracking reports from LunchAssist PRO if you have those entered in there. So that's a new thing just for our pro members that I wanted to make sure I mentioned that relates to your AR. So you can get your AR compliance report on demand from Pro. That's a new feature we added last year. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that is really clutch, actually. And this is all very critical to keep in mind. But I have to ask, is it a review or is it an audit? I'm a little confused.
Yeah. So definitely that's a really good question. And really the review versus audit conversation is something that we kind of wanted to make sure we addressed, right? Because we have a bunch of former reviewers on our team. Like we have 5 different folks in our team that used to be going out and doing the audits. And technically it's not an audit, technically it's a review. But we're going to use the term audit
Mm.
because, it's a kind of a layman's term about the review, but it's an administrative review. It's different than an audit. Audits are typically like government audits are typically more in depth than what, like if you can imagine something more in depth than they are. Um,
Yeah.
but so technically it's a review, but if it's okay with everyone, we're just going to use the term audit interchangeably, and
Okay.
reviewers, auditors, administrative review, audit kind of interchangeably.
All right. That's helpful. Now, what are the steps of this review or audit process?
Yeah, so let's kind of just take a big picture look at the audit at a glance, right? And like I said, some of this is like very basic to some of you, but just kind of starting at square one for people who might be new to the AR process. So you've got, and there's different ways to break this down. There's a lot of steps to the AR process, but we like to kind of break it down into 4 steps. So starting with the offsite assessment, that's kind of the very first thing you work on when you're getting audited. And so this is like a big questionnaire where you answer like 75 questions, and you have to submit a whole bunch of policies and procedures and attachments and stuff like that. So that's due 8 weeks prior to your entrance visit. And then, as you can see, we've got these other steps here. So um, let's say, just kind of walk through the timeline. You've got your entrance visit on May 2nd.
Mm.
Then, like, if you go through that, that's your entrance visit, right? Then the month of review is the month for which your most recent claim has been submitted prior to the entrance visit. So typically in an example like this, your month of review is going to be like a month or two before the entrance. So it's going to be like March, or it could be April if you really wanted to have your April claim submitted, by May 1st. So, and that's kind of at your discretion. You can kind of negotiate that a little bit with your auditor based on what works best for your program. It doesn't have to be like prescribed by them. But let's say like you've got it in March, because that's probably more common. Then you've also got something called the targeted week of menu review, and that's going to take place on a 5-day week during the month of review. So in this example, it would be in March, and that's like the week that your menus are all kind of examined, like all your menu packets will be due for. And then you've also got something called the meal observation. So I alluded to this a few minutes ago. You've got the meal observation, and traditionally, this always took place during the entrance visit. That's why it's called an entrance, because it's like when the auditor enters your district and then they go out and observe your kitchens.
Mm.
But, and that's how it's like designed by USDA. But what we've been noticing is that sometimes now CDE is overlapping that on your week of review during the month of review. So they're coming early, and I just want to point this out. This is really important for those of you who haven't had this experience yet, because it's just something to be mindful of, because it can be really confusing because you think, oh, my review's in May. And then you're like, wait, why are they coming in March? I'm confused. So you don't necessarily have to do it this way. You can push back and say, no, 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 like I'm good. I don't want it in, I don't want you to come twice. Like I just like staffing reasons, like it's just easier on us if we do the meal observations in May. So that's
Hmm.
something that you can decide on. Personally, I like it kind of just to be clean and like get all your stuff organized, and then do that meal observation in the week of the entrance, like it's kind of traditionally designed to be done. but CDE does sometimes like to do it during the week of targeted menu review as well. So it's just good to know that that's sort of how this
Yeah.
timeline can work. So like at a glance, you've got these four steps here again, which is, your offsite assessment, your month of review, which includes that targeted week of menu review, your entrance visit, and your corrective action is like the final thing. And then your meal observation could basically take place during the month of review or the entrance visit, depending on like what your reviewer and you decide on.
Okay, that makes sense. And this is a great outline of the AR process. That's really helpful to visualize for me. And so going in, what questions do I want to ask my reviewer from the jump?
Yeah, yeah. So right off the bat, the biggest thing I like to do is to get all those dates organized. So I just rattled off a whole bunch of stuff, and you're probably like, "Whoa, that's a lot of moving pieces," and it is. So that's kind of the first thing that we like to ask is these six questions that you can see here on the next slide that kind of go through what to ask your reviewer basically about those dates. And that
Oh,
sort of helps you get this all at a glance of like building out a timeline, and then you can work backwards to kind of project manage the review. And this is really nice too because you can ask these questions to sort of get a baseline of how your reviewer is thinking about their like what they're going to
mhm.
do, and then you can kind of negotiate. So those of you who know me, like I like to kind of push back on little things here and there. And I just want you to know that like it's like if they say your review is on a certain day, it doesn't have to be that day. If you're going to be on vacation or you're having surgery, like you can talk to them and say, look, we want to change it. Or if something just doesn't work for you because that's a big month for your district, you've got district celebrations, like whatever it is, you can kind of push back and sort of get the timeline to work for you and your team. And so that's why we recommend also starting with this because as soon as you find out you're getting reviewed, ask these questions and then you can kind of start to map it out and see like, oh, maybe I can get her to like change it from, January to April because I really want to enjoy my Christmas break. Um,
Right,
so,
right.
like things like that. Just sort of get those dates and then kind of see where you're at and what you want to negotiate.
Okay, this is a great starting point, but already it seems like a lot to keep track of. How do you recommend staying organized through all of this?
Yeah, so we do a lot of like project managing of reviews for our clients that we work with, and we use a project management system to like map out all the dates and keep track of checklists and things like that. But you don't have to do all that, right? Like that's not necessary. Like you don't necessarily need like a consultant or a project management system. You can do it on your own as long as you're really organized. And I think the biggest piece of advice I have, in addition to getting all those dates just like clear, like write them on a big like board in your office, is to really get clean file organization. So that goes a long way if you can kind of just like start a file for your AR documents. And that ideally is on like, a share drive or a Google Drive or a Dropbox so that you can kind of collaborate with other people on your team. Because even if you're in a small district, you're probably going to still have some input from like, a fiscal person or like your sites who are sending you production records and stuff like that. So put it on a digital file, kind of workspace, if you will, and then just start an AR folder as soon as you know you're getting audited and start saving like emails from CDE, paperwork that you're getting from your sites, name the files in a nice, clean way, and just start building out that audit file. And then what's really nice about that is then it sort of sets you up for when you're going to do your offset assessment and you have to attach things to CNIPs. Or, eventually when you're going to send stuff to your reviewer, even if you're eventually going to print some stuff out, you can print it from that one file, right? So building it all digitally also gives you that history. So now we've had like LunchAssist has been around for like 8 years now. So we've gone through a lot of audits with people, and we're going through like the second or third one with some people. And so it's nice to go back and see that digital file and see that history. And so it could work the same way for you, like building your own digital files. The next time you get audited, it'll make your life so much easier. Or if you leave the district and you want to hand that to the next director to be like, hey, here's all the audit files, like here you go, set them up for success. That's really nice as well.
Yeah. I mean, digital file organization, I feel like is so key. It always feels so much easier to do it with work than your personal files, but you're reminding me that I'm just thinking about all the photos in my iCloud and I need to organize, and this is making me make my head spin thinking about that. But digital file organization is definitely key here.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
going
Don't worry,
back to
my
the
personal
first.
files are not this organized either. You're not the only one, Emma. Just my work files.
So So going back to those four steps of the AR review, the first step you mentioned is offsite assessment. Now, what's your best piece of advice for people completing that?
Yeah, so the offset assessment, really my biggest piece of advice is to kind of really do very well on your offsite assessment because it's like your first kind of the first thing that you're going to do with the audit is your offsite assessment. So if you can ace that, it really sets you up for success. So, um, and not to be self-promoting, but one of my biggest pieces of advice is to join the boot camp. Those of you who've done the boot camp, if you agree, like throw something in the chat because it has an answer key and all your attachments and stuff that you need so that you can ace your offsite assessment, and then you can sort of customize all that stuff for your district. But even if you don't have that, just going through that offsite assessment very meticulously and kind of just being really intentional about how you answer everything and making sure you check all of your attachments to make sure that they include everything that needs to be included. And what I love is when I have a client who submits their offsite assessment and they get no findings, no technical assistance. And then the reviewer is just like, oh, wow, you guys are so organized. And it just sets you up for success because it's kind of like, putting your best foot forward from the very beginning of your audit.
That sounds like a really great resource. Also, it sounds like you really need to start off strong. But if it takes a village, how can you get the whole team on board? I mean, how can people prepare their staff at individual school sites for the review?
Yeah, it definitely does take a village. That's a really good way of putting it. And I think trying to work with your whole team, anyone who's going to really be like interacting with the reviewer or anyone who has paperwork that they're producing that's going to be given to the reviewer, it's good to get them just like everyone on board together, right? And one of the things that I love is this meal observation checklist. And I'm going to throw this in the chat for everyone. Because this is one of our boot camp resources. And so this is our little freebie for today. And I love this checklist. I literally bring it with me everywhere I go if I'm going to a school, because even if they're not getting audited, like I'll bring this with me if I'm doing like site monitoring for a client, right? And I'll be like, oh, okay, like I'm just going to do this checklist as well, because it sort of is everything you need to have at your school site. So you can share this with your team and let them do their own self-assessment of their school sites and then maybe do like a little bit of a pre-audit or something before the actual administrative review takes place to kind of confirm. And then just kind of like as much as you can, bringing everyone together and using the AR as a learning experience to help elevate your program and like, you know, all those things that sort of fall by the wayside in non-audit years, kind of like bringing them back in and like making sure we got everything, all of our signage is up, like, all the different things that we need to be doing and making sure it's all on the up and up.
Okay, so with this checklist, it sounds like you're kind of recommending a staging, like a trial review or meal observation. Is that right?
Yeah, like some sort of mock audit, I think is a really great idea. I don't know if Ayana is on the call this week, but we were just emailing about that. Yeah, Ayana from Oakland, we were kind of emailing about a mock review. And I love this idea because you can use that checklist to sort of do it, but then also like any of your other paperwork, right? Like it doesn't have to be isolated to a mock review at your school sites. Any of your paperwork, like claims, for example, before you give your claim to the state for the month of review, have someone else on your team double check it. Like maybe go through them, like, here's everything that should be in here. Like, get someone else to check it, or you check it if you're not the one who prepares it, right? Same thing for your menu documentation. Like maybe you have a dietitian who helps you prepare that. Then have someone else like check it before it goes in, and that can be your little like mock review. And that's how we've been really successful with the schools that we've helped because we basically just check everything a whole bunch of times, right? So the
Right.
more eyes you have on things, the better it is. And then you prevent findings before they get found by the state, right? And then prevents you from having to deal with corrective action and stuff like that.
Got it. Okay, now speaking of the actual schools and school sites involved, how many schools are reviewed during the audit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this is completely like easy answer from USDA. It's outlined in the AR manual. So you can see here, like, think about how many school sites you have. And this is how many sites that are feeding sites and CNIPs. So how many sites you file claims at. Then that's how many sites are going to be reviewed. And this is good to have handy because we have had it a couple of times where the reviewer says, "Oh, we're going to be going to 3 schools." And we're like, "Wait, this client only has 7 schools. Like they should only get 2 sites reviewed." And people make mistakes. So it's just like good to kind of keep an eye on that because you definitely don't want more schools to be reviewed than that's like required. So that's nice. And then that's where like you can focus more of your efforts on like doing mock audits and stuff at those sites that get selected for review.
Okay. All right. Now we've gone through offsite assessment and we've gone through meal observation. What else is left? Is there any more
Yeah,
paperwork?
there's lots more paperwork, yes.
Huh.
Fun stuff. So we've got, yeah, offsite assessment, and then we've like, let's say we've already done our monthly review, we've got our meal observation. And
Oh,
then
right.
we've got our
Entrance.
entrance visit, right? So the entrance visit is what's left, and there's a whole bunch of paperwork that's due at the time of the entrance visit. So this is really good to know that you basically submit a whole bunch of paperwork with the offsite assessment, and then the rest of the paperwork is essentially due at the entrance visit. And you can see some things here have an asterisk because it's only applicable if you operate that type of program. So, like if you have CEP, then meal applications are not going to be looked at because you don't have them. So that's kind of good to know. And then I just want to revisit what I was saying before about the meal observation. So remember, if your meal observation is during the entrance visit, then that's like more straightforward because that'll be the first time that the state comes out to your site. But if your meal observation is during the week of targeted menu review within the month of review, then just make sure you know that like all of the paperwork that's due during the entrance visit, it's still due during the entrance visit. It's not due early. So
Hmm.
just because they're there early, like let's say they're there in March to do the meal observation, it doesn't mean that then they start looking at meal applications and verification and professional standards. Like, and we've
Okay.
had that a few times where reviewers have tried to do that and like we're calling our client being like, it's not quite ready. Like just tell them to do it during the entrance. It's not due yet either. So I like to point that out just to be like, that's fine if they come early, but it's really just the meal observation that they're doing. They're not looking at all of your menus and like all of your other paperwork until the entrance.
Okay. Okay. And when is menu documentation due?
Yeah, so menu documentation is due during the entrance. So even if your meal observation takes place early, that week of targeted menu review, like that big packet that you put together that's like 100 pages
That's
long,
right.
it's
Yeah.
still due, yeah, in the entrance because think about it. You can't produce that until you've served the whole week of menus and you've got your
Right.
production records. And like, what if like the lettuce on Friday was wilted, so you swapped it out to broccoli? Then you need to update your packet, right? So we don't even usually start preparing that week of targeted menu review paperwork until after like the week has been served
Hmm.
because like especially with supply chain it's just like pointless like there's
Right.
usually a couple substitutions so
Right.
you can still give the auditor if they come out early you can still give them the paperwork for that day of review so like at the end of the day you can say okay here's my recipes and my specs for what was like observed today but your whole week's packet with like the menu compliance report and all of that it doesn't need to be submitted until the entrance visit.
Okay. And what do you need for menu documentation?
Yeah, so menu documentation, it's for the week of targeted menu review and the day of meal observation, which are sometimes overlapping, sometimes not, right? So keep that in mind. And then here's like a really nice chart that kind of goes over what's required. So for the week, you need like the whole week's
Ah,
menu and like all of your recipes, CN labels, like product formulation statements, food labels, and then your menu compliance worksheet. You don't need a nutrient analysis unless you're high risk. You just need the component worksheet. So that's kind of nice. Most people are not high risk. We've never worked with a school that was high risk that needed a nutrient analysis in California. So it's just that like compliance for components. And then for the day, it's a little simpler because it's just like your recipe specs, production records for the day, right? So, like I said, if they come out early and they want the paperwork just for that one day, you can say, oh yeah, here's my like little packet of today's menu stuff. But your whole week with like especially that menu compliance worksheet and every day's meals, that doesn't need to be completed until the entrance visit.
Okay. Okay. I think I get all of this for now, the 4 steps. But closing out the review, let's go to that 4th step. When you have everything submitted, what else do you need to do?
Yeah, so like kind of that final touch is your exit conference. So this is also something that's kind of changed since COVID. Like I know when I was a director, I had my entrance visit on Monday and my exit conference on Thursday, and it was really easy, kind of. But now
Mhm.
sometimes the reviewer just goes off and you don't hear from them for a couple of weeks, and then you might have to chase them down to get your exit. It just depends on the reviewer. I don't mean to say it's always working like that. It really does depend on reviewers. So. Um, Make sure you get an exit at some point, and then when you get that, they'll give you a report of your findings or your technical assistance, and then they'll give you a deadline for when you need to file your corrective action plan. And I do want to give a little caveat here of like TA versus finding. So TA or technical assistance, you might get that throughout the review, and that you can essentially just take it for what it is. Like you can take it to heart, you can ignore it, doesn't really matter. TA is just their opinion. It's like, oh, I think you should set up your serving line differently. It doesn't tie to a regulation. It's someone's opinion based on their experience. If it's a real rule violation, it'll be a finding and you'll have to file corrective action for it. So that's really good to know because sometimes people get really upset. They're like, I got all this TA. And I'm like, it's okay. It's just like FYI. Like, you just have a reviewer who wants to like really
Right.
be helpful. But it's not a finding. And so findings are where you actually have to file corrective action and then you want to you want to avoid having repeat findings in the future. So, and then just to sort of temper your expectations on that, and those of you who've been through reviews, you probably know this, like as much as you try, like some people will get a perfect review, and we definitely love when that happens for, for schools. But it's not like you could put your best foot forward and have this amazing program, and you could still get a few findings because it's just like you've got a really picky reviewer, right? Or we've worked with clients that are kind of a mess and they get a perfect review. We're like, oh wow, that reviewer wasn't very detailed. Um, if you get a few findings, it's okay. Like 2 or 3, 4 findings, we're never really too stressed about it. But on the next slide, you can see that there's like a corrective action plan that you would file if you have a finding. And the biggest thing to do is like, we just want to make sure you avoid fiscal findings because that's where it's really kind of upsetting and like dramatic if you get a fiscal finding. But if it's just a little finding about, oh, like, you know, something happened at the school site and they, for whatever reason, they ran out of one of the milk types, or, one kid got through without their fruit or veggie and they had to be sent back. Um, However, things happen, right? So you just have to file a little corrective action and then that's it. And try to prevent it the next time as well that you get audited.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been amazing. I mean, it sounds like LunchAssist Pro has some pretty incredible resources for download for folks that want to join. But I also want to thank you for taking the time to explain all of this. You've answered a lot of questions, at least that I've had, and I know others might have. So I'm gonna pass it over back to Mike before we open it to Q&A. And then if folks want to pop into the chat any questions they have about the administrative reviews, please feel free. And Mike, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. I appreciate it. Yeah, look, this was a great presentation today on some of our services. We talked about the AR Bootcamp, which is one of the add-on services that we have. But we also have a lot of other things as well with the LunchAssist Pro membership. So if you are interested, please reach out to us. We got things like on-demand training videos. We got things like curated resources, professional standards tracking tool for everybody, not just you, but also your staff and everything. And then if you are looking for additional features like access to our Spanish video library, different things like that, the AR Bootcamp, one of the things that we talked about today, or if you want, one-on-one consulting services, we also offer that as well with our fabulous team of former auditors. So another thing I want to mention too, some great use of kit funds. We've talked about kit funds in some of our other series, and I've mentioned this previously, but this is a great way to utilize your kit funds. It is an allowable use of your kit funds to purchase any of our services. A lot of customers have been taking advantage of utilizing their kit funds to get multi-year contracts. So they can pay for access now while they have the money to do so, and then keep it for however long. So kit funds are allowable. You could use your regular cafeteria funds. I do want to make sure that everybody knows, obviously with purchasing, things take time. So if you want to utilize those 2021 kit funds, if you have some money left, please get started on that, sooner rather than later. Again, talking about the recording access, we are going to send out a follow-up email. It'll have a link to the recordings that you can access. They're all posted up on YouTube. Next week's chat, Thursday at the same time, 2 p.m., we're going to be talking about summer programs. And that concludes the main portion of our call today. So anybody that needs to go ahead, feel free to hop off. If not, we'd love to have you stick around for our live Q&A session and answer any questions that you guys might have. So I'm going to pass it back over to Emma to lead us in the live Q&A.